Chapter 877. They. Lin Chia raised his head and looked towards the direction Qin Yangrong was pointing. All he could see was the pitch-black stomach wall with nothing else in sight. There's nothing there, Lin Chia shook his head. Just because you can't see it now doesn't mean they don't exist. Qin Yangrong's gaze seemed to penetrate the boundless void, a hint of fervor appearing in his eyes. They have always been in places where everyone can only look up, it's just that no one has noticed. They are watching from afar, they are waiting, and they will eventually return. You mean there's something on the moon? On the coast of the fishing village, and Qingyu furrowed his brows upon hearing Qingo's words. Qingo nodded. After my father died, I've been repeating this dream. Every time I wake up from it, it's in the middle of the night and my bed is right next to the window, so the first thing I see when I open my eyes is that moon. What did you see? An eye. Fear flickered in Qingo's eyes. On the surface of the moon there's a huge eye and it's looking at me. There's an eye on the moon? And Qingyu was taken aback and looked up at the sky again. The moon's shadow was hazy and he couldn't see anything at all. I know this sounds ridiculous, but I really saw it. And then, can you still see it now? No, every time I see that eye, a golden light flashes across the moon, and then the eye disappears and everything goes back to normal. Golden light on the moon? Upon hearing this description, a thought flashed through in Qingyu's mind like lightning. It felt as if he had grasped something crucial, yet it also felt like he had grasped nothing at all. Just as he was about to calm down and think it through, a cacophony of noises came from the village behind him, as if someone was screaming and cursing. Qingo was startled and turned to look at the village, only to see that a fire had ignited in a corner of the village, thick smoke billowing upwards. What happened? Qingo saw a villager rushing past and quickly grabbed him, asking. The widow Wang from the west side of the village stabbed the pregnant Yao Mei with a knife. The villager spoke urgently. What? Qingo's eyes widened in disbelief. Aren't their families usually on good terms? I don't know. 6 stabs all in the belly. While stabbing, she was mumbling something crazy. Your child, my child, as if possessed, and the 2 men couldn't hold her back. Qingo stood there in a daze, seemingly unable to comprehend it all. I'll explain more when I get back. I'm going to the next village to find a barefoot doctor. I don't know if Yao Mei can be saved. The villager sighed and quickened his pace, running swiftly towards the other side of the coastline. And Qingyu watched his departing figure falling into silence. He knew very well that this fishing village had become completely isolated from the world. No matter how fast this villager ran, he wouldn't reach the next village, let alone find that barefoot doctor. Time had long erased everything. And Qingyu wasn't a doctor and didn't know how to treat illnesses or save lives. Even if he could use some means to save the pregnant woman, there was no time left. He turned to look at the village that had fallen into chaos, his expression unusually grave. His guess was correct, this was just the beginning. Why hasn't Erju come back yet? Qingo, hearing the villager's news, looked equally anxious. He turned to glance at the distant horizon where no boats were in sight. He gritted his teeth and sprinted towards the fire. However, he had barely taken 2 steps when he stumbled and fell to the ground. He lay there for a moment, slowly sitting up as still as a statue, his entire being in a daze. Uncle Qin. And Qingyu frowned and hurried over to help Qin go up, asking in confusion, Uncle Qin, what's wrong? Qingo stared blankly ahead for a long time before coming to his senses. He turned to Qingyu, his eyes filled with a tide of crimson. I heard it, he murmured. What? I heard it. Qingo broke free from Qingyu's arm, covered his ears, his face filled with terror and disbelief. My father is calling me? Shangjing City. Night Watch Headquarters Interrogation Room. Qin Lu, locked alone in the center of the interrogation room, suddenly trembled, raising his head sharply, his eyes rapidly turning crimson. His expression twisted in madness, as if in pain, as if struggling. It's coming again, it's coming again. Qin Lu's lips trembled, the veins on his neck bulging, murmuring in a voice only he could hear, Grandpa. I understand now, Grandpa. Don't say any more, don't. Damn it. Damn it. Can't you all just be quiet? I already know your power, your will, enough. Don't say any more. His voice grew louder, his expression more ferocious as he glared with those crimson eyes, raising his head and painfully banging it against the chains. producing a series of dull thuds. Outside the interrogation room, Suiqing and the others saw this scene, their faces changing drastically. "Open the door. Let me in." Suiqing opened the door to the interrogation room and walked straight to the pained, howling Qinlu, frowning as he spoke. "Qinlu, what are you saying?" "Damn." Qinlu raised his head, his crimson eyes staring at Suiqing, his body trembling uncontrollably. "We can't win." "What?" "The Night Watch, the Great Xia gods. We can't win against them." Qinlu shouted. "They are too powerful beyond our understanding. On the day they return, no existence can stop their footsteps. Only by disarming, giving up resistance and kneeling at their feet, worshipping their existence, can humanity have a glimmer of hope." Suiqing's face visibly darkened. "Are you crazy? Qinlu, what are you talking about? For years I've been hearing their voices every 3 days. They whisper madly in my ear, instilling all about their power and will into my mind. No one in this world understands the terror of them better than I do. Believe me, Suiqing, we really can't win." Qinlu's expression was filled with extreme pain, and in his eyes, which seemed to bleed, there was deep sorrow and helplessness. "Who are they?" Suiqing grabbed Qinlu's collar, roaring in question. Qinlu's facial muscles twitched uncontrollably, a pale arc forming at the corners of his mouth as he slowly said in a trembling voice. "They are the end of the universe, the origin of all strange mysteries, the supreme existence that transcends all laws. Their name is Cthulhu." Chapter 878 Cthulhu. Cthulhu. Left Qing heard these 3 syllables and paused briefly, then firmly shook his head. Impossible, the Cthulhu mythos didn't arrive with the mist. Apart from a few ancient ruins suspected to be related to Cthulhu, no traces of Cthulhu deities have been found anywhere in the world. "They're not here." "Is that so?" Qinlu sneered. "Then, what about beyond Earth?" Left Qing froze. "You're right, the former Blue Rain team and the Shangxia Society have basically explored every corner of the mist, and there truly aren't any traces of Cthulhu deities on Earth. But what about beyond Earth? Have we looked there? Do you think the moon above our heads is real?" After Qinlu's words fell, Left Qing stood stunned for a long while before speaking in disbelief. "Are you saying that the Cthulhu deities also arrived with the mist? And they landed on the moon?" Qinlu shook his head. "It's reversed." "What's reversed?" "The order is reversed." Qinlu spoke word by word, fighting through pain. "It's not Cthulhu arrived with the mist, but rather, the mist arrived because of Cthulhu." "The mist is a product of the Cthulhu gods?" Left Qing's mind shook. In the Night Watcher's current understanding, the collapse of world order originated from the mist that suddenly emerged from Antarctica 100 years ago. After the mist's arrival, most countries in the world became dead zones. Only the gods of Daxia sacrificed their divine power and physical forms, transforming into 9 national divine steels that completely isolated the mist outside the borders, allowing Daxia to escape disaster. After the mist's arrival, countless bizarre mysteries began appearing around the world. To eliminate the mysteries that appeared within Daxia's borders, the Night Watchers came into being. Meanwhile, the appearance of the mist caused the gods who originally resided in the divine realm to lose their divine power, their status and strength declining as time passed. With divine power also declining in the divine realm, some deities left their realm to walk among the mist, presumably investigating the cause of the mist's appearance. They were discovered by Daxia's Night Watchers exploring the mist, which led to the creation of the deity observation sequence. During the Night Watchers' century-long exploration and observation, they gradually discovered traces of deities from various pantheons, but some pantheons' deities never appeared, with the Cthulhu mythos being one of them. Strangely, although no Cthulhu deities had been discovered, the Shangxia Society had found several ancient ruins related to the Cthulhu mythos around the world, suggesting that the Cthulhu mythos might have truly existed in ancient times. But why they hadn't been observed now remained unknown. Now Left Qing got the answer from the half-mad Qinlu. Even if this answer wasn't necessarily correct, it provided them with a direction. More importantly, if Qinlu's words were true, then the appearance of the mist could also be explained, and the puzzle that had troubled both the Night Watchers and the gods for 100 years would be solved. Left Qing walked to the window, looked up at the increasingly clear moon in the sky and frowned slightly. This doesn't make sense. If the Cthulhu gods really exist on the moon, we should have discovered them long ago. Dasha has so many astronomers watching that moon, we've even observed the Seraph Michael before. Cthulhu deities are extremely large. There's no reason we couldn't have detected them. Chenlu lowered his head and laughed weakly. He looked up at Left Qing and slowly spoke. Don't you find it strange? What? Michael, why has he always stayed on the moon? Hearing these words, Left Qing froze in place. In 1928, a golden sword beam shot out from the moon, crossed through space, and leveled the North American volcano where Lucifer was located. Only then did we turn our attention to the moon and observe his existence. Since we discovered him, Michael has remained stationed on the moon, never moving an inch. Over these 100+ years he has only done two things: launching a sword attack from the moon to suppress the fallen angel Lucifer, and giving mortal divine domain to an unnamed youth in Songnan City. He completed both these things from the moon. Don't you find it strange? The deities of all mythological systems walk among the mist. Even Lucifer, who shares the same origin as Michael, is active in North America. Why does Michael alone stand on the moon watching over the human world? What is he doing there? In the deep sea of the fishing village. They? Who are they? Lin Chia frowned and asked. Qin Yongrong's mouth curved uncontrollably upward. He raised his head, his elderly disheveled hair floating, those crimson eyes staring in the direction of the moon. He spread his arms and fanatically called out their names. They are the end point of the universe, the origin of all mysterious anomalies, the supreme existence above all laws. They are Cthulhu. Hearing Qin Yongrong's almost fanatical way of praising, Lin Chia's brows furrowed. Cthulhu. Of course Lin Chia knew of this pantheon's existence. However, as far as he knew, no Cthulhu deities had ever been observed in the current mist world. During training camp, the instructor had also taught that the gods of the Cthulhu mythos might not exist at all. Thinking about what Qin Yongrong had just said, Lin Chia pondered for a moment, then raised his head again to look at the darkness above. Always in a place where everyone could only look up to, watching, returning. The moon. Lin Chia turned to look at Qin Yongrong, his eyes full of shock. The Cthulhu deities are on the moon? Are you an agent of the Cthulhu gods? Agent? No, I'm not worthy to represent the great Cthulhu, I'm merely their follower. Qin Yongrong's eyes were full of fanaticism, but his tone was extremely humble. It was the great Cthulhu who granted me a second life, bestowed upon me great power, cleansed my polluted bloodline, and through this pivot, allowed me and my descendants the chance to hear their voices, to approach the ultimate truth of this universe. This is the glory of our Qin family. He stared with his crimson eyes, twisting his body as if insane, while reaching out to gently caress the stomach wall behind him. The flesh that had swallowed half of his body suddenly began to twist and writhe, crawling up from his waist as if wanting to swallow him whole. You're mad. Lin Chia's spiritual power swept over that wall of flesh, as if discovering something, and he spoke coldly. You've already been consumed by this flesh, it's devouring your body. No, I'm not mad. Qin Yongrong's body was gradually being swallowed by the flesh as he laughed. Do you know, since embedding this piece of flesh, I've gone from being an ordinary fisherman who nearly died at sea to nearly touching divinity, and it only took 4 days. These 4 days I've been listening to their voices every day. I can feel their desire to return. Qin Yongrong reached out his hand as if trying to touch the unreachable moon, and shouted in an excited and maniacal tone. I, Qin Yongrong, Cthulhu's most faithful believer, will personally guide their return. Chapter 879 Soul Contamination. The moment he finished speaking, the seawater in the stomach walls began to churn violently, and a fierce, savage force burst forth from Qin Yongrong's body. In terms of power level, he was just half a step away from breaking through the peak of the Klein realm and reaching the human limit. In the frantically churning seawater, the lanternfish's faint light began to flicker uncontrollably. Its own power level wasn't high, and now under the impact of Qin Yongrong's force, it was on the verge of collapse. Sensing this terrifying power fluctuation, Lin Chia's brows slightly furrowed. His consciousness has been completely corrupted by that mass of flesh. Lin Chia's gaze swept across the stomach walls wrapping Qin Yongrong's body as he said quietly to Jialan, I can sense an extremely bizarre and violent divine power continuously flowing into his body from the beast's corpse. His current power level must have been forcibly elevated by this beast's divine power. And Kinjiu had heard from the ancient god church members that the more powerful the deity, the more easily their divine power could influence their proxy's personality and thoughts. Although Qin Yongrong isn't a proxy, I think the principle is the same. Under such enormous divine power washing over him, his subconscious and thoughts have been completely influenced. You mean his current thoughts aren't actually his own? Jialan asked puzzledly. Yes, if what he just said is true, then fundamentally he's just an ordinary fisherman who happened to enter here by chance. How could he become bold enough in just 4 days to claim he would guide the return of a pantheon's deity? The change in his mentality is too drastic. If I'm not mistaken, the one who truly wants to guide the return of the K-system deities, is it? Lin Chia stretched out his hand, pointing at the stomach wall above. This beast? What's its relationship with the Cthulhu mythos? We don't know yet. Perhaps it was a creature that once extremely worshipped the Cthulhu mythos. Or perhaps it was a member of the Cthulhu mythos itself. In the frantically surging seawater, the beast's stomach walls had already swallowed most of Qin Yongrong's body, leaving only his head and chest with the long sword exposed. His floating hair swayed in the seawater as he lifted his aged face to look at the void above, with the reflection of a blood moon faintly appearing in his eyes. He slowly spoke. The blood moon is about to descend again. Fishing village. The sky gradually darkened, the yellow dusk hidden behind heavy clouds. Night hadn't fully fallen, yet the world was already dim. The previously calm sea surface suddenly whipped up cold, fierce winds. Waves rose dozens of meters high, crashing heavily against the shore. The shattered water droplets turned into a sky full of salty rain, falling onto Enkinjiu and Qin-go. Qin-go collapsed on the ground, his body painfully curling up as he covered his ears, frantically banging his forehead against the ground. Stop speaking. Stop speaking. My head is about to split open. As if completely unaware of the pain, he kept banging his head against the ground with increasing force. Blood dripped down his face onto the ground, yet he showed no signs of stopping, as if trying to literally crack his head open. Enkinji's brows tightly furrowed as he grabbed Qin-go's shoulders, stopping his self-harming behavior. Uncle Qin, what did you hear? Before Enkinjiu could finish his question, he froze in place. On Qin-go's blood-covered face, his eyes were as red as blood. He stared blankly at the dim sky above, with a blood-colored moon reflected in his pupils, emanating an eerie and bizarre light. I heard it, Qin-go muttered, the voices of them. Enkinjiu was stunned for a moment, then immediately activated his forbidden domain, his eyes taking on a gray tinge as he began to rapidly analyze Qin-go's body. Vaguely, he saw a crimson thread extending from the sea, splitting in two. One thread merged into Qin-go's bloodline, continuously consuming his spirit and flesh. The other thread pierced through the boundless sky, extending toward an unknown destination. Soul pollution? Enkinji's brows furrowed tightly the moment he saw that thread. He took a deep breath, his gray eyes seriously focusing on that blood-colored thread, seemingly trying to analyze its existence. But the next moment his eyes suddenly experienced intense pain, as if a sharp thorn had pierced his eyeballs, forcing him to close his eyes. Ah! Enkinji groaned, holding his head with both hands, his expression equally agonized. Several dozen seconds later he finally recovered and struggled to open his eyes, panting as if exhausted. Just now when he tried to analyze that blood-colored thread, the bizarre polluting force attempted to invade his mind through his gaze. Fortunately, Enkinji reacted quickly enough and withdrew his gaze in time, otherwise he might have ended up like Qin-go, polluted by that bizarre force. But he couldn't understand why Qin-go, just an ordinary fisherman, would suddenly become involved with such terrifying pollution. Enkinji looked at Qin-go writhing in pain on the ground, then turned to look at the blood-colored thread extending from the seabed, and its second segment that split in two and flew toward the sky to an unknown destination. His pupils contracted slightly as if he had realized something. My wife died of illness several years ago, and my son left the fishing village years ago to make his way in the outside world. A few days ago I went fishing with my father and encountered a storm. I was lucky enough to be rescued by other villagers' fishing boats, but my father wasn't. These two sentences from Chin-go suddenly echoed in Enkinju's ears, and in that instant he thought of a possibility. Bloodline? This soul pollution has seeped into the bloodline. Enkinju muttered. If his guess wasn't wrong, then the blood thread extending from the seabed must have come from Chin-go's father, who was also the true source of this soul pollution. And this bizarre soul pollution was affecting his descendants through some mysterious bloodline connection, including Chin-go, who remained in the fishing village, and his grandson Chin-lu, who had left the village early on. The dreams Chin-go had these past 2 nights weren't just simple dreams, as he said. This was his father transmitting some kind of information to them through their bloodline. The dead, blood pools, red moon kneeling in worship. Enkinji seemed to realize something and suddenly looked up at the sky. At some point at the edge of the heavy clouds, a corner of a blood-colored moon had quietly emerged. Chapter 880 Fierce Battle. Bang! A huge crash came from the shore. And Qingyu turned to look and saw a broken fishing boat being battered by the surging waves against the shore, releasing a thick smell of blood. The rusty deck had already turned into a sea of blood, with numerous scarred corpses lying in pools of blood, their eyes wide open, unable to rest in peace. Knife wounds, bite marks, holes from fishing spears. Their injuries were all different, but they shared one thing in common. Their faces remained twisted in anger until death. They were the fishermen who had gone out to sea together today. They died killing each other. Just then, a blood-covered figure holding a blood-stained dagger stumbled off the fishing boat. It's all mine, he. The man Chin-go had called Air Juzi stumbled forward while muttering to himself like a madman. Suddenly, his peripheral vision caught Chin-go kneeling on the ground nearby, and Qingyu standing beside him. He froze for a moment, then gripped his dagger tighter, his expression turning savage again. Die. Anyone who fights me for it must die. He raised the dagger high and charged at Qingyu like a mad dog, suddenly accelerating. Qingyu's brows furrowed as anger rose in his eyes. A sharp scalpel appeared in his palm, and with a flick of his wrist he was about to throw it. Qingyu. Jiang Er's voice suddenly came through the Bluetooth speaker at Qingyu's waist. Qingyu's half-raised wrist trembled, clarity instantly returning to his eyes. He put away the scalpel, dodged Air Juzi's mad slash, and lightly pressed his palm against the man's chest, sending him flying several meters. The next moment an invisible thread shot out, instantly binding him tight. After doing all this, Qingyu took a deep breath, finally relaxing his body. Thanks to you, Jiang Er. He had almost been influenced again. Even though he had been consciously controlling his emotions, he had still lost his composure just now and nearly lost his rationality. He could clearly feel that the power affecting people's emotions was gradually growing stronger. Qingyu looked up at the red moon gradually emerging from the dark clouds, the gravity in his eyes growing heavier. It's that moon, he muttered. Now he was almost certain that the mysterious force affecting people's emotions came from that red moon. As the moon's outline became more complete, the power controlling emotions would grow stronger. When the red moon was fully exposed in the sky and its light fell on this village, all living creatures would likely completely lose their rationality and become monsters that only knew how to kill each other. But why had only this fishing village's moon changed like this? Could this time loop be related to that red moon? It's okay, although the force affecting people's emotions here works on me, its effect seems to be greatly weakened. Jiang Er's voice came through the Bluetooth speaker. Qingyu nodded. Although your physical body has lost its vitality, your brain is still active, so the part of the brain that controls your emotions would still be affected, just much less than us. Qingyu, have you found a way to block this emotional influence? Qingyu fell silent. If this mysterious force that made people kill each other really came from that red moon, the most direct solution should be to block the light. Qingyu lightly raised his fingertip and black thorns burst from the ground, forming a cocoon that enveloped him and Chin-go. He closed his eyes and carefully sensed for a moment, but the irritability and depression in his heart hadn't decreased at all. Physical barriers were ineffective. In other words, this red moon's influence on living creatures wasn't mediated by light, but by some other unstoppable form. Damn. How should this be handled? He couldn't just fly up there and shatter that moon, could he? If they couldn't stay clear-headed under the red moon's influence, the only option was to forcibly break out of this time loop and escape this village. But without finding the source maintaining the time loop, they couldn't get out unless they tried to brute force their way through the loop. But the problem was, if they really had the power to break through the loop, they would have gotten out long ago. Even the highest level among their group was only unlimited. Still far from that level. Wait. Just then, Qingyu seemed to think of something and suddenly turned his head toward the direction whereby Li Pangpang, Chao Yuan and Shin Qingzhu had left earlier, his pupils slightly contracting. Perhaps they did have access to that terrifying level of power after all? The roaring flames danced like demon tentacles in the dark sky. The crimson moon had revealed half of itself from the clouds, and an eerie, sinister aura spread throughout the fishing village. Quick! Hold her down. We need 2 more people. Has she gone mad? How come we never knew she was this strong before? Where's the barefoot doctor? Why hasn't the doctor come yet? Little sister is almost gone. Next to a burning house, 3 men firmly pinned down a blood-covered middle-aged woman holding a chopper. The woman's veins were bulging, red light flickering in her eyes, her entire expression utterly insane. Opposite her, a woman with a heavily pregnant belly lay silently in a pool of blood, no longer breathing. Let me go. Let me go. The woman pinned to the ground roared but couldn't move her limbs at all. She suddenly lowered her head and bit the arm of the man holding her hand with her sharp teeth, blood seeping from the wound. Ah! The bitten man cried out in pain and withdrew his arm, his eyes also tinged with crimson, furious and vicious. You bitch, are you asking to die? He reached into the ruins of a nearby house and grabbed a brick, raised it high, and smashed it down on the back of the struggling woman's head with a dull thud. Blood flowed down the back of the woman's head. Her eyes rolled back and she instantly lost all strength, collapsing lifeless on the ground. Old Li, you killed her. So what if I killed her? She killed little sister first. But you shouldn't have killed her. I'll kill whoever I want. Don't provoke me. Or I'll kill you too. What nonsense are you spouting? The men standing around the woman's corpse widened their eyes, their pupils also tinged with red. They glared at each other like savage beasts operating purely on instinct, suddenly pouncing on each other and beginning to fight to the death. Chapter 881 Trust Them. Bailey Pangpang, who was passing by, saw this scene and his expression changed slightly as he was about to step forward to stop it. At this moment, a hand rested on his shoulder. Cold sweat appeared on Chao Yuan's forehead as he looked at the fighting crowd in the distance and shook his head. It's useless, they've completely lost their rationality. Trying to reason with them won't make them stop, it will only make them turn against us. Let's take action directly. After saying this, Chao Yuan seemed to realize something was wrong and added, I don't mean killing them. I know I'm still clear-headed right now. Bailey Pangpang took a deep breath, reached into his pocket, and the green rope he had used to tie up the mad dog earlier flew out again, instantly extending several times in length, dancing in the air like a green snake, firmly binding all the villagers who were fighting together. Though bound by the green rope, the villagers' expressions remained extremely fierce. They turned their heads to look at Bailey Pangpang and the other 2, roaring in anger, frantically twisting their bodies trying to break free from the rope. But the green rope seemed to have grown onto their bodies, and no matter how hard they tried they couldn't break free. Seeing those chaotic figures roaring and shouting at him, anger once again flashed uncontrollably in Bailey Pangpang's eyes. He quickly closed his eyes, clenched his fists, veins bulging on the back of his hands as if trying to endure something. In the dark sky above, more than half of the red moon had emerged from the clouds, crimson as blood. Fresh blood flowed from the nearby corpses, and in the hot, scorching air from the burning flames, the smell of blood kept stimulating the 3 people's nostrils, like the hand of an evil and irritable demon, gently stirring their consciousness. Large beads of sweat rolled down Chao Yuan's cheeks, the redness in his eyes growing stronger. His peripheral vision caught the blood-stained short knife dropped by the villagers and he couldn't look away. In his mind there seemed to be a voice constantly whispering, telling him to pick up that short knife. He unconsciously moved half a step forward. The next moment, a figure beat him to it, picked up the short knife from the ground, and threw it backward, deeply embedding it into the distant eaves. Chao Yuan, you can't touch it. Red also appeared in Shin Qingzhu's eyes as he stood there, breathing heavily, looking at Chao Yuan with determination and seriousness. Chao Yuan stared at Shin Qingzhu in sudden realization, remaining dazed for a long while before coming to his senses, painfully rubbing his temples. I'm sorry. I lost control again. It's not your fault. You already have the Black King's presence within you, making you more prone to anger and losing control than others. Shin Qingzhu took a deep breath and said to Bailey Pang Pang beside him, "Take out another forbidden item and tie all three of us up." Bailey Pang Pang was stunned. Tie everyone up? Aren't we going to look for a way out of here? In our current state, we're not fit to search anymore. In a while, our rationality might be completely lost. The only thing we can do now is control ourselves and not cause trouble for Qi Yi, Jialon, and Yu Jiangir. Shin Qingzhu breathed heavily, struggling to organize his thoughts as his rationality fluctuated wildly, and continued. Jialon has immortality. She won't be affected by the power here. She's with Qi Yi and they might find a way to leave before the loop ends. We can only trust them. After hearing this, Bailey Pang Pang nodded and took out another green rope from his pocket, controlling it to move around the three of them. Just then Bailey Pang Pang suddenly groaned, the redness in his eyes flickering again. The green rope he was controlling suddenly began to move violently, like an out-of-control python, frantically writhing in mid-air. The other green rope binding the villagers also began to tremble slightly. Bailey Pang Pang's consciousness could no longer control two forbidden items simultaneously. Seeing this, Shin Qingzhu clenched his teeth, stepped in front of Bailey Pang Pang and extended his palm. "Give me the forbidden item, I'll do the binding." "Brozhuai, can you control it?" Bailey Pang Pang glanced at Chao Yuan, who was trembling uncontrollably nearby, and worriedly said, "If your consciousness also loses control and the forbidden items loosen, we won't be able to hold old Chao back." "I will stay conscious." Shin Qingzhu extended his palm again and repeated, "Give it to me." After hesitating for a moment, Bailey Pang Pang still handed the forbidden item to Shin Qingzhu. Shin Qingzhu took a deep breath, infused his spiritual power into the forbidden item, and the green rope came alive again, shooting out and directly binding Bailey Pang Pang and Chao Yuan together. Chao Yuan's arms began to struggle unconsciously but couldn't break free from the green rope at all. "Brozhuai, aren't you going to tie yourself up too?" Bailey Pang Pang asked, seeing Shin Qingzhu standing alone in the corner. Shin Qingzhu shook his head. "If I tie myself up, I'll become more prone to anger and my emotions will lose control faster." He staggered to the edge of the burned-down house ruins, sat down on the black bricks, took out a cigarette from his pocket and put it in the corner of his mouth, his right hand trembling as he raised it to his mouth, his thumb and middle finger lightly pinching together. Scratch. A flame ignited under the red moon filled with dust and embers. The flame lit the cigarette and the smoke dispersed in the wind above the village. Shin Qingzhu took a deep drag and slowly exhaled. The red moon cast his lonely yet steady shadow on the charred wall. He sat alone before the roaring masses, calmly watching this insane world. Amidst the swirling smoke, reason and madness waged a silent war. After an unknown amount of time, a figure slowly approached from the end of the road. It was a young man carrying a black coffin on his back. His steps were somewhat unsteady, but his expression was completely calm. He casually pulled out a blood-stained cleaver from the roadside and determinedly walked towards the bound Chao Yuan under the red moon. His eyes were completely crimson. Under the sea, in the frantically churning waters, Lin Chia stood on the back of the lanternfish, a hint of red also creeping into his eyes. The power affecting emotions is getting stronger. Is this the red moon he spoke of? Lin Chia's brows were tightly knitted, fine beads of cold sweat appearing on his temples as he stared intently at Qin Yangrong, who was about to be swallowed by the stomach wall. "Kid," Qin Yangrong smiled coldly at Lin Chia, who wore a pained expression, and said, "I'll say it again, if you don't want to die, come pull out this knife." Lin Chia clenched his fists tightly and remained silent, seemingly ignoring Qin Yangrong's words completely. Qin Yangrong shook his head. "Why don't you understand? Under their gaze, weak creatures like humans cannot maintain their rationality. Whether it's you or your companions in the village, you'll all end up killing each other." Chapter 882. The Truth of the Fishing Village. Even if you persist until the end of the loop, the laws of time will mercilessly erase you. Here there is no escape. This fishing village is a deadly trap that can eliminate any being below the divine realm. Your only way out is to pull out this cursed blade of time, end this endless loop here so you can escape from their gaze and avoid being erased by time. Lin Chia took a deep breath, forcefully suppressing the turmoil in his heart, and spoke coldly. Pull it out, and then what? Let this giant beast revive under the red moon, leading to mass destruction. Hearing these words, Qin Yongrong was slightly stunned. He looked at Lin Chia with surprise and asked puzzlingly, "How did you know? Isn't it obvious?" Lin Chia stretched out his hand, pointing at the constantly writhing stomach wall behind Qin Yongrong. "Since your so-called red moon appeared, life force has resurged in the previously lifeless giant beast, and it began actively devouring your body. Moreover, as this emotion-affecting power grows stronger, its writhing becomes faster. When the red moon's power reaches its peak, the stomach walls here will completely devour your body, and this giant beast will be resurrected. This is what it wants. Combined with your recent ravings, I can basically guess the truth about this fishing village." "Oh." Qin Yongrong raised his eyebrows. "What is the truth?" "The time in this fishing village isn't just a simple loop. It's also a prison." Lin Chia slowly spoke. "And the prisoner confined within isn't you, Qin Yongrong. It's it." Lin Chia's gaze fell on the enormous stomach wall before him. "If I'm not mistaken, this giant beast corpse sunken in the deep sea must have a close connection to the Cthulhu mythology. According to what you said, the Cthulhu gods exist on the moon, yet are waiting to return, which suggests that they are currently in some kind of imprisoned state, unable to freely return to Earth. Therefore, that giant beast corpse at the bottom of the deep sea might be their only remaining means on Earth. So, they want to resurrect this beast." Lin Chia paused, large beads of sweat rolling down his cheeks. He took a deep breath, reorganized the clues in his mind, and continued. "You said earlier that we would either die from time erasure or under their gaze. And this gaze from the moon must be manifested as the red moon. 50 years ago, something might have happened on the moon, allowing the imprisoned Cthulhu gods to project their gaze to a corner of Earth. And this gaze from the moon became the red moon in human eyes. This gaze fell on the waters where the beast's corpse lay, simultaneously covering the fishing village on the shore. From the beginning, their goal was to resurrect this beast through the red moon. Both you, Qin Yongrong, and the village on the shore that was also encompassed by the red moon were just accidental byproducts. You, Qin Yongrong, were just an ordinary person who encountered a shipwreck before the red moon's arrival and accidentally got trapped in the beast's stomach wall. But with the red moon's descent, your body was gradually devoured by this beast, its power and thoughts frantically eroding your consciousness, turning you into its puppet without you even realizing it. You mistook its will for your own thoughts, becoming a fanatical follower of Cthulhu in just a few days, even wanting to personally guide the Cthulhu gods' return from the moon. Since the red moon cannot be stopped, meaning the beast's resurrection cannot be interrupted, Old Wong could only lock this area's time in a loop, reversing time back 3 days when the red moon reaches its peak, at the moment the beast is about to revive, thus reversing its resurrection process. Therefore, under this temporal prison loop, this beast's resurrection has been delayed for 50 full years. Am I correct?" The last sentence Lin Chia didn't direct at Qin Yongrong, but at the black stomach walls around them. He was attempting to dialogue with the awakening beast. After saying all this while enduring the red moon's influence, Lin Chia felt his brain was about to explode. His breathing became increasingly heavy, his consciousness began to fade, and an unprecedented feeling of agitation surged in his heart. Qin Yongrong stared at him for a long time before speaking in disbelief. "Just from those few words I said, you deduced all of this?" Lin Chia didn't answer, he just silently clenched his fists, the veins on the back of his hands bulging one by one. "It seems you're much smarter than the last batch of rats." Qin Yongrong couldn't help but sigh. They only discovered the truth after seeing the timeline recorded in this circular ring, yet you figured it out just from my few words. Truly remarkable. Hearing these words, Lin Chia slightly froze. Last batch. Yes, they were also 7 people wearing gray cloaks who came in on the last day about 3 loops ago. Images of the mask team quickly flashed through Lin Chia's mind, and he suddenly raised his head. Where are they? What happened to them? What happened? Qin Yongrong sneered. I should have told you, this is a deadly trap that can eliminate any being below the divine realm. They did well to endure the red moon's influence, but unfortunately, they still didn't choose to pull out this blade even until they were erased by the laws of time. They were really stubborn. However, Qin Yongrong paused, then changed his tone. There seemed to be a young person who finally outran time and disappeared. Lin Chia stood frozen in place. Mask was erased by time? Calculating from when they entered the village, the mask team entered the loop about 12 days ago. But until now the loop here hasn't been broken, which means they didn't choose to pull out that blade then. Without pulling out the blade, the loop wouldn't end and their final fate could only be death by killing each other or being erased by time. Mask survived the red moon but couldn't outrun time. This result, Lin Chia should have expected it, he just subconsciously avoided this question, not wanting to face such an ending. He still refused to believe it. You're talking nonsense. Under the red moon's influence, Lin Chia's agitated emotions instantly ignited, and he roared with bloodshot eyes. You don't believe it? Qin Yongrong sneered. The circular ring at the end of this blade records the timeline of every loop here. If you don't believe it, see for yourself. Lin Chia's gaze fell on the slowly rotating ring of light at Yuan, determination flashing in his eyes. He suddenly rushed out of the anglerfish's light range, coming before Qin Yongrong's chest, staring at a certain spot in that circular ring. Chapter 883 Temporal Thug. 12 days ago. 7 figures wearing gray cloaks passed through the beast's esophagus, arriving before the pitch-black stomach wall. The gray-cloaked figure wearing a spiral mask raised their palms slightly, and 2 massive purple vortexes opened simultaneously. One swallowed all the seawater within the stomach wall, while the other blocked the esophagus, preventing outside seawater from rushing in. In a matter of seconds, the seawater inside the stomach wall was completely drained. King Mask looked up, staring at the yuan, deeply embedded in Qin Yongrong's chest, and the slowly rotating light ring at its end, his eyes narrowing slightly. Captain, that blade looks exactly like yours? Spiral glanced at the blade in Qin Yongrong's chest, then at the yuan, at King Mask's waist, exclaiming in shock, Don't tell me your blade comes in couples? King Mask replied helplessly, That is yuan, but it doesn't belong to this time. Balance frowned and thought for a long while. Could that blade be? Yes, it should be the blade carried by my future self, that the Night Curtain team encountered before. King Mask nodded. That's amazing, Captain. Rose said excitedly. Doesn't that mean you'll definitely become a god in the future? Of course, Captain is already about to break through to become humanity's ceiling. How far can godhood be? Moon Ghost agreed. It's hard to say, as the timeline changes, the future can change too. King Mask shook his head. You mean your future self coming back to the present to change the timeline will affect your future? Balance asked, puzzled. But if the present is changed, the future's trajectory will also deviate. What if he doesn't become a god in the end and doesn't come back to the present? Then the present wouldn't be changed. Wouldn't that create a paradox? King Mask shook his head. What you're talking about is the traditional grandmother paradox, which is different from my time sequence rogue principle. Every pantheon has time gods, but their divine domains all have some differences. The time sequence rogue, given to me by Kronos, is the disordered rogue outside of time. After obtaining this divine domain, even if I go back to the past to change history, timeline changes won't affect my established past. Using the grandmother paradox as an example, even if I went back to the past and killed my grandmother, I wouldn't disappear because of her death. Then couldn't you go back to the past and change history recklessly? Spiral asked, mouth agape in shock. Balance walked behind him, smacked the back of his head and couldn't help but scold. What nonsense are you talking about? Captain has only gone back to change history twice and he's already become. How could there be no price? There is indeed a price. King Mask nodded slightly. The karmic backlash force produced by tampering with the timeline greatly reduces my lifespan. The further back I go and the greater the butterfly effect caused by changing the timeline, the more terrifying the reduction in lifespan becomes. Those 2 previous time reversals, although they were both less than a day, caused such strong butterfly effects that combined, they reduced my lifespan by nearly 20 years. King Mask's 2 time reversals were both to go back several hours into the past to warn the Night Watchers of approaching enemies in advance. Although the time reversed wasn't much because of his early warning, tens of millions of people survived. Such massive karmic backlash force concentrated on him naturally resulted in a terrifyingly large loss of lifespan. Looking at King Mask's graying temples and his haggard, weathered face, the members of Mask team fell silent. When King Mask performed his first time reversal, he was not yet 20 years old, and even though his lifespan was reduced by several years, he was still young and vigorous, so they hadn't noticed. But after King Mask performed his second time reversal recently, they found that he had visibly aged. They had guessed that this might be a side effect of King Mask's time reversal, but they never imagined that the price would be 20 years of life. How many 20-year periods does one have in life? After 2 time reversals, King Mask, who should have been only 26 years old, jumped directly to the age of nearly 50. His best and most precious years of youth vanished in an instant. Seeming to notice the heavy atmosphere among everyone, King Mask smiled slightly and said, "Don't be so pessimistic, I am the time god's proxy after all. Perhaps after I become a god, I'll be able to have endless life." King Mask's consolation didn't seem to dispel everyone's low spirits. Spiral glanced at everyone from the corner of his eye, and after a moment of silence scratched his head and laughed. "Captain, don't forget about us after you become a god. You don't necessarily have to make us eternally young or anything, but extending our vacation by a few days shouldn't be too much to ask, right?" Hearing Spiral's joke, everyone rolled their eyes, and the previously heavy atmosphere became lively again. Just then the old man pinned to the stomach wall by Thon slowly opened his eyes. "Some rats have snuck in," Qin Yangrong spoke calmly. "If you want to live, pull this blade from my chest. After I get out, I'll properly reward you." The moment his voice echoed in the dark space, the Tamask team members immediately tensed up. They exchanged glances and King Mask's voice silently appeared in everyone's minds. "My future self stabbed Yuan into his chest. This old man must be problematic. Let me sense the timeline contained in that closed loop. You help me buy some time." As his words fell, King Mask slowly closed his eyes, connecting his divine domain with the Yuan in Qin Yangrong's chest, quickly reviewing the timeline within that ring of flowing light. Spiral nodded imperceptibly, turned to look at the old man on the stomach wall, and spoke while playing dumb. "Reward? Really? What kind of rewards?" Qin Yangrong was stunned, as if he hadn't expected someone to actually believe such nonsense. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Ah, found an idiot. Supreme power, endless life, whatever you want I can give you." "Supreme? How supreme? Higher than Klein?" "Much higher than that." "Wow, you're amazing." During their meaningless conversation, King Mask's brows furrowed deeper and deeper. After who knows how long, he suddenly opened his eyes, his expression more serious than ever before. "This is bad." He looked up at the pitch-black stomach wall, muttering, "What's wrong?" Rose noticed King Mask's change in expression and asked worriedly. King Mask turned around, took a deep breath to calm his chaotic thoughts and spoke seriously. "Listen carefully to every word I'm about to say. Chapter 884, Time that cannot be outrun. The red moon descends, all creatures turn on each other and the giant beast awakens. So the purpose of this time loop's existence is to prevent this beast from reviving?" After hearing Wang Mian's narration, everyone in Mask team stood stunned. "That's right." Wang Mian nodded. From the looping timeline, Wang Mian had understood all the secrets of this fishing village, and could guess why his future self set up a time loop here. Similarly, he was the only one among those present who realized the severity of the situation. Until now he had reversed time twice, and he knew clearly in his heart how terrifying the side effects of time sequence rogue were. Since his future self was willing to spend his life to return here and lock this place in a loop, it meant that once that giant beast awakens, it would cause an extremely terrifying butterfly effect. The best way to solve an error is to prevent it before it occurs. "So you've discovered it." Qin Yangrong, embedded between the stomach walls, shook his head with some regret. "In that case, you should know what will happen to you if you don't pull out this sword?" "What, failed at persuasion now turning to death threats?" Xuanhua laughed. "You're underestimating us too much. We've weathered so many storms over the years, you think just one threat from you would scare us?" Xuanhua looked at Qin Yangrong contemptuously, quietly stepped back half a step and elbowed Wang Mian, asking in a lowered voice, "Captain, what should we do? We're not really going to die here, are we?" Wang Mian's brows furrowed tightly. After careful consideration he said, "Wait here and keep your emotions in check. Don't let that red moon affect you. I'll reverse time and see if I can go back to before we entered this village, to prevent all this from happening." This Mask Team members all nodded. Wang Mian gripped the hilt of Yuan at his waist, releasing the aura of peak Klein realm. He slowly closed his eyes and pushed his divine void to the extreme. The flow of time around him rapidly slowed down. Dust floating in the air gradually stopped. Wang Mian's breathing became more prolonged, pale hair strands suspended in midair. He stood there like a statue frozen in time. In an instant his eyes suddenly opened. Silver circles rotated and intersected in his eyes, like reversed precision clock parts, making one dizzy just looking at them, as if containing some extremely profound rules. Meanwhile he stepped forward forcefully, his form shattering the void. A white light instantly enveloped his body, and the next moment he completely disappeared. Time passed minute by minute. After several dozen minutes, the surrounding time disturbed again. White light flashed and Wang Mian's figure stumbled out, coughing violently, a streak of black hair at his temple visibly turning silver white. He bent over, removed the Wang character mask from his face, large beads of sweat dripping down as he breathed heavily. Captain, are you all right? Seeing this, all members of Mask team immediately stood up and ran to Wang Mian's side. Wang Mian raised his head, looking toward the void above, his eyes full of fatigue and unwillingness. It's no use. I can't run out of this loop. If it were in the normal time flow outside, it wouldn't be difficult for Wang Mian to use Divine Void to reverse time and return to a day ago, but it was different here. The time here was distorted by the light ring at the end of Yuan. Not a straight line but a circular loop where head meets tail. Moreover, this loop was formed by time laws, not simple Divine Void. At Wang Mian's current time reversal speed, he simply couldn't catch up with the loop's cycling speed. He was like a hamster trapped in a circular running wheel. No matter how hard he ran, he couldn't escape this cage. He couldn't return to the past to change the history of Mask team entering the fishing village. Hearing these words, the Mask team members exchanged glances, and Tianping reached out to pat Wang Mian's shoulder. It's okay, Captain. If this method doesn't work, there might be other ways. Yuge, Tanxiang, Xinghen, you three form one group, I'll go with Xuanwen and Qiangwei in another. Let's search the village edges separately, there might be gaps we haven't discovered yet. Tianping calmly directed the Mask members and others nodded, quickly leaving this place. Tianping turned around, looking at the exhausted Wang Mian, hesitated for a moment before saying, Captain, you rest well here, leave the rest to us. Just as Wang Mian was about to say something, Tianping's form had already turned into an afterimage, disappearing from Wang Mian's sight. Qin Yangrong laughed coldly. Wasted effort, I've already told you, you cannot leave this place. Wang Mian gazed in the direction where everyone had left, remained silent for a long time, then lowered his head to put on the Wang character mask again. Taking a deep breath, determination appeared in his eyes. Having witnessed the loop timeline countless times, he knew clearly in his heart that Qin Yangrong wasn't wrong. If there were gaps in this loop, the Red Moon's power would have leaked out long ago. Since there were no other ways to leave here, the only way out was still time reversal. No matter what, he must outrun time here. If once isn't enough, then twice. If twice isn't enough, then thrice. He had no other choice. Because he carried the lives of all Mask team members on his shoulders. He placed his right hand on the sword hilt, activating Time Sequence Rogue, again his form plunging into the river of time and disappearing. This time he was gone for a full 2 hours. When that white light appeared again, Wang Mian's body fell heavily to the ground. He curled up in pain. All his hair had turned silver white, his haggard and pale face showing shocking wrinkles, aging nearly 10 years compared to before. Now he was a man close to 60 years old. Cough, cough, cough. Wang Mian's weak coughing echoed in the empty stomach walls. He had run against the time flow for a full 2 hours, yet still couldn't escape this loop. He had failed again. Damn it. Damn it. Why still not possible? Why couldn't he still outrun time? Wang Mian's wrinkled hand clenched tightly into a fist, heavily pounding the ground, those turbid eyes full of frustration and unwillingness. Chapter 885. Fortunately it's us. He knew clearly that with his Klein-level strength, it was impossible to escape this closed loop, so he had to force himself to break through and reach the human ceiling realm to have any chance of survival. However, he had already pushed his potential to the extreme, yet still couldn't break through that realm's barrier. He didn't have much lifespan left. Unprecedented anxiety and rage surged in his heart. He began to hate his own weakness, regret entering this fishing village, and even resent his future self for setting up this closed loop here. Was he doing this deliberately? Does he want to kill me? Wang Mian raised his head, his crimson eyes staring at Qin Yangrong's chest that was almost completely absorbed into the stomach wall, and that long sword surrounded by flowing light rings. At this moment, a crazy idea emerged in his mind. Why not just pull out that sword? As long as he pulls out that sword, he and his teammates could survive. As for what happens later, why should he care? They, the mask, have worked hard for so many years, hanging their heads by their waists and dancing on knife edges, surviving countless near-death experiences. They've done enough for Xia. Why can't they be selfish just once? Wang Mian struggled to stand up, his crimson eyes fixated on that yuan sword as he slowly walked towards it. Yes, that's right. Qin Yangrong, with only his head exposed now, became excited upon seeing this. Pull out this sword. All of you can survive. Wang Mian, wearing a gray cloak, stumbled to Qin Yangrong's front. His right hand slowly raised, reaching for that long sword deeply embedded in flesh. His heart suddenly skipped a beat, and a flash of clarity appeared in his blood-red eyes. His hand stopped in midair. What was he doing? Wang Mian quickly withdrew his arm and looked up at the void above, fear appearing in his eyes. It was that red moon. After such a long time, the red moon's influence on people's emotions had reached a terrifying level. He had just lost the race against time when his mind was at its weakest. Now being corrupted by the red moon, his rationality was rapidly disappearing. He had almost done something irreversible. How were the others doing? Wang Mian bit his tongue, using pain to maintain his clarity as much as possible. He turned around and quickly left the giant beast's corpse. Meanwhile, in the fishing village, on the scorched ground, the blood-covered whirlpool sat down holding a burning incense stick. The blue smoke from the incense rose and transformed into a semi-virtual chain, firmly binding together the howling and fierce moon ghost, Sandalwood, Starmark, and Rose. Their pupils had already turned completely crimson. Whirlpool, are you really still okay? Beside him, Scales asked weakly, his face covered in sweat. I'm fine, can hold on a bit longer. Unexpected that under this red moon, you would be the one among us to hold out the longest. Right? Aren't I amazing? Whirlpool forced a smile. Indeed. Scales sincerely sighed. Actually, I realized long ago that you're smarter than any of us, you just pretend to be foolish. Whirlpool shrugged. In the team, having you as the smart one is enough. Being a carefree fool can occasionally lighten the mood, nothing wrong with that. Scales looked at Whirlpool for a long while, then smiled slightly. That's why you're smarter than me. Whirlpool didn't respond. He just calmly watched Rose and the others who had lost their minds, helplessly closed his eyes and slowly said, Actually, I really regret it. What? We finally had a vacation. What's wrong with everyone just having fun together? Why did we have to take this job? Whirlpool's eyes turned slightly red as his voice raised. We've done enough for Xia, we just wanted to rest properly, what's wrong with that? Now look what happened, not only did we miss our vacation, we're going to lose our lives. After a long silence, Scales said, You're right, but have you thought about it? If we didn't come, then those sent here would have been Night Curtain. Investigating the fishing village wasn't supposed to be the responsibility of veteran special teams like Mask. If Night Curtain hadn't disappeared to Japan, if they hadn't happened to return at this time, if their return hadn't helped share Mask workload, then Mask wouldn't have had this vacation. Without this vacation, they wouldn't have come to investigate this fishing village on their way, and wouldn't have been trapped in this time loop. A series of coincidences changed the special team that came here from Night Curtain to Mask. The elderly Wang Mian tried his best to change history to make up for past regrets. But as Black Pupil said, some people's destinies cannot be changed. Hearing Scales' words, Whirlpool froze. In his mind appeared the images of those young figures standing on the award podium. They were the juniors that Mask had watched grow up. After a moment, Whirlpool sighed. Then, good thing it was us. Good thing it was us, not them. Both fell into silence. Just then, a figure rapidly crossed the sky and landed before them. Captain. Whirlpool's pupils contracted slightly upon seeing the aged Wang Mian. How did you? Wang Mian didn't answer, he just silently turned to look at the others who had lost their minds and were tied up, his brows tightly furrowed. He opened his mouth about to say something, when the ground suddenly began to shake violently. Boom! In the sky, that red moon had completely emerged from the clouds, its crimson light illuminating the earth. At the same time, a dazzling silver light burst from the deep sea, weaving into a circular ring with head and tail connected, rapidly expanding outward. All matter within the range of this ring was annihilated, and simultaneously, a new world instantly reconstructed, time rewinding back 3 days. The loop is ending. Wang Mian sensed the terrifying power of laws contained in that silver ring, his pupils suddenly contracting. The end of the loop meant the time law's erasure was beginning. Whirlpool stared blankly at the approaching ring in the distance, suddenly turned back, grabbed the aged Wang Mian's shoulders, and 2 purple whirlpools simultaneously bloomed, one spinning on Wang Mian's body, one spinning on Whirlpool's chest. An extremely pure spiritual force frantically poured into Wang Mian's dried-up body. Wang Mian was stunned, turned to look at Whirlpool, shock flashing in his eyes. Whirlpool, what are you doing?